everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I'm starting off this good. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace. This week's show is on deconstructing as a parent. And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you are on Facebook, grant StreamYard access so we can see your name when you comment or have a question. Otherwise, you're just going to be a Facebook user. Please remember to keep all comments and questions related to the show topic and that this is a safe space. Let's give a shout out to our top sponsors. Thanks so much, Ruth, Kirsten, Michelle, Ray, and Heidi. Thank you so much for your generosity and support. If you enjoy the show, you can go to sherrypalace.com and use the support tab. There's literally dozens of ways to show me and the show support. Thank you in advance, but more importantly, thanks for being here and welcoming us into your home and joining this conversation. I appreciate you. Okay, on with the show. Let's meet our guests and get smarter. First, we have Jason Elam. Jason is Brandi's grateful husband and dad to 4 awesome kids. He is a former pastor and radio broadcaster who currently co-hosts the Messy Spirituality podcast. He recently compiled a book, Parenting Deconstructed, Navigating your spiritual evolution without leaving your family behind, which is available now from Choir. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be with you.
Likewise. Okay, next we have a repeat guest, and that is Carl. Carl is a former pastor. He is a writer, podcaster, and blogger. He and his wife co-created the Desert Sanctuary, a home for spiritual nomads. Their latest book is Out into the Desert, Thriving Organized Religion. Welcome, Carl.
Hey, how you doing?
Welcome back. It's
Hi,
always
Jason.
good to have you here.
Thank you.
And last but definitely not least, we have December Rose. December is an author, spoken word artist, and mother of 2. She is also a contributor to the Parenting Deconstructed, Navigating Your Spiritual Evolution Without Leaving Your Family Behind book. Welcome, December.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We were talking backstage, and I started deconstructing almost 30 years ago. So I was actually a single parent going through it, but not necessarily looking at the parenting angle other than I felt a need of protection. I was so emotionally distraught going through the beginnings of deconstruction. Didn't even have a word back then. I was just leaving the church out of fear and shame and all of the horrible things, the reason why people leave the church. I just wanted to protect him. So being a parent of younger kids now, as you guys are starting to deconstruct, how does that work? Jason, I'll let you start.
Oh my goodness. Such a great topic for conversation. This is really important to my heart because we went through this. All right. I was a pastor for over 20 years. We raised our kids primarily in the church. But when I started deconstructing, what I was deconstructing was that fear and shame that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
My religion was completely built on fear. And so when I began replacing that fear with love, I realized that God, whatever God is not controlling because love doesn't control.
Exactly.
And so I started wondering, well, what does this mean for my parenting? We had really controlled our kids. I mean, wouldn't let them have access to anything. We didn't allow dating. We didn't allow any of the things that we thought could creep in and corrupt their little souls, and send them, in our beliefs at that time, to hell. When we no longer believed in that, we started looking for resources on how do we parent in light of this deconstruction, this change from a fear-centered life to a love-centered life. And we were shocked that there just weren't many resources available for that.
Yeah.
And so we basically reached out to all of our friends like Carl and December and asked them to contribute to essays to this book, because this is the book we needed during the time when it was put together.
Well, they say that if you need a book and it's not out there, write it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? What's up, Joel? Glad to see you. December, what are your thoughts on the subject? How are you handling the deconstructing and parenting?
Well, I'm handling it one day at a time.
That's the only way you can do with parenting.
Just one day at a time. I'm learning as I go, right? Because I thought this journey was mine alone. And so when I exited the pulpit, I didn't think to give an explanation to my children or sit down and have a discussion prior to with my children. Just because it didn't occur to me that that they are part of my personal deconstruction process. It should have, because I was their pastor.
Right.
I'm the only pastor that they have known. And since they were born, I've been pastoring. But I learned, my children taught me that they needed to have that conversation, because they started asking, why can't we go to church? Well, when are we going to get to see Sister Debbie? And this and that kind of thing. And Sister Debbie is like sweet, sweet sister that always give them candy. And so they're like, you're feeling lost. They're feeling lost. And I didn't realize, they taught me that there's a area of deconstruction that is specifically you need to focus on where your children are concerned, not just your personal walk with faith.
Yeah, my son started going to church on his own because of a neighbor. She is an evangelical, and her son and my son were best friends. And there was always a guilt trip from her. She wanted me to go. And I wouldn't. I just would have look, I've been there, done that. You have absolutely no idea. And he finally left when they sent home a letter saying that Pokemon was satanic. So that was his okay, I'm not doing this anymore. But as a teenager, he was a teenager, purely evil. And I was like, you need God, you need church. So I took him to a different church. And as we're pulling into the parking lot, it was full of protesters. There were signs, there were marchers everywhere, because evidently the weekend before, one of the pastors was busted with molestation. And so we're driving in and he's like, oh, I need God and you're taking me here. And I'm like, oops. Fail. I'm not gonna try that again. Carl, talk to me. How has this affected your parenting? Oh, by the way, real quick. Hey, Sarah, good to see you. Sorry, Carl, go ahead.
Carl is muted.
Oh, you're muted, Carl.
I should never do that because I never turn it off.
You said really profound things.
My first pastorate was when my son was started when my son was 5 years old. The girls had 2 girls that were 1 and 2 or something like that when we started. So Laura was totally engaged with her children, and she did a great job with them while I was trying to keep these small town churches and help them recuperate and survive. So my children were raised in ministry. And I always say the worst mistakes I made in ministry were exactly like the worst mistakes I made as a parent. And like Jason said, they were all fear-based.
Yeah.
They were all worrying about how someone was going to perceive us or what our image was. And those always led to my worst parenting episodes, which somehow I found out that you could apologize, and I did that, and that helped a lot. But later on, I'll share the 3 things I shared in the book. But basically, our children saw the bullshit early. My son used to be my sound man. As soon as he was big enough to do that, he was always my sound guy. And he would sit in the sound booth learning before he got old enough. Then when he was old enough in junior high, he took over the sound, and he got a bird's eye view. He saw what organized religion can do and can be. And he kind of figured it out. And I think he taught my daughters, but there's a few things we found out that helped. When I had my son, he was one of those guys, back when I believed in spanking, I didn't ever have to spank him because I would just look at him, he'd start crying. And he was a good kid all the way through. He had one episode in college, and so if I'd have wrote a parenting book back then, it would have also been bullshit, because I would have said, here's 10 things that'll absolutely work. And then my daughter was born who's strong-willed, and none of that worked on her.
Yeah.
And so the things that I wrote in the book, though, were based on a lot of times what my children taught me. And it's what they, like I told you last week when we were talking about something else, my son would say to me, we'd disagree on something. He wouldn't argue with me. He'd just say, you might want to think about this. You might want to consider this, Dad. And in that way, it's kind of leading me out. So, but I like this book a lot because it's all different perspectives. December has a different focus than what I have right now. And Dr. Mark Karras is, a real scholarly, kind of. Anyway, Jason can talk about all that. He knows better than I do. But I'm just glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you again. So I know that, my son briefly wanted to be a pastor, and he actually, even though he wouldn't consider himself religious in any way, he not only straightened out my life, but he also became a source of hope for me. Almost like, duh. Like when I got cancer and I was completely freaking out, he's like, don't even worry about it. It's going to be fine. Everything will happen. And then when things started happening, I got a lot of I told you so's. How do you maintain that spiritual connection without the religious nature of the shame and all of those types of things?
Well, I think for me, it was a reorienting of my life around love. As I was saying earlier, if God exists, and I believe God does exist, but if God exists, then God is love. And in love, there cannot be any fear. And so I began to see that we are all coming from love. We're made of love, and we're progressing towards love. And so if the fiber of the universe is love, then that should change the way that we treat one another, But that's not out of guilt and shame. It's us being who we really are. At our essence, we are rooted in love. And so I think that applies to parenting, right? Because religion says everybody's fallen, everybody's broken, everybody's sinful by default. But this new paradigm, this new mindset says everybody is good, everybody is whole, everybody is love on the inside. And so if we can see our children as good rather than a problem to be solved, and we can pull the best out of them rather than looking for the worst and trying to catch them and being suspicious all the time, then we can raise up young people who are passionate and full of light and full of love, and not looking to condemn the world around them, but honestly looking for the good in everybody. And that changes society.
Totally. It changes parenting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I used to say,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Carl.
December.
Okay. My take on that, I like Carl said, I had come from a different perspective than most of the others, because whenever my children came out of the womb, I was their pastor. So they have not known any type of experience other than the one that they have lived under my leadership. I pastored 2 churches over the course of their lifetime, one that I started and one that I was voted into. And the members from the one I started came over into the one that I was voted into. So they they don't know any other kind of religious experience than the one that I have provided for them. So they did not experience the indoctrination of that they are inherently evil and stuff like that. I've always been pretty liberal in my thinking concerning what I believe about God and love and his love for us. So they had not experienced that guilt-ridden, fear-based, condemnation type gospel. And so because I have taught from a place of love and taught from a place of growth and taught from a place of grace, whenever I exited the pulpit and we stopped going to church, it put they had a void that I didn't think would be there, but as someone who taught them and reared them up in the word, you would think that I should have known that there had been a void there if I had built them and raised them around this God, right? And I seen somebody post that deconstructing with your children is something like breaking the news to them about Santa. Possibly, if you have deconstructed to an area where you believe that God does not exist, perhaps. But deconstruction is different for everyone. Deconstruction is different for everyone. And hopefully y'all can hear me. The internet is doing something strange. So let me know if things get choppy. You're good. Some people go through deconstruction and they come to the conclusion that God does not exist at all. So for someone who is in that place with their walk, in their faith walk, perhaps deconstruction with their children is like breaking the news to them about Santa. But for someone like me, who deconstruction did not take me to a place where there is no God at all, it put me, to me, it's I'm closer to God now than I was when I was pastoring because of deconstruction. And I believe more in God than I did before. And I feel more loved and more fulfilled and more full of purpose than when I was pastoring the church for 5 or 10, almost 10 years. My children are 10 now. I just stepped away from the pulpit in 2020. For me, it's not like it's apples and oranges, because God is more real to me now than he was before. He's more, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, I fulfilled the law with love. In other words, I counseled it with love. I counseled the law with love. And for me, where I am now, counseled out the condemnation, counseled out the guilt, counseled out the fear, and all the stuff that the church uses to keep you in bondage in those pews. All that stuff been counseled out. So to me, God is more real now. So my deconstruction is different. Now, what they experience from their mother now is, hey, God loves you right where you are right now, whatever you're doing. So if my son is 9 years old, and let me be careful how I say this, because things live forever on the internet. How I want to put this. Let me just say this. Whatever my son chooses to do with his life and the relationships in the future, I'm gonna make sure he knows that he's loved by God. There's nothing that he could come home with. You know what I'm saying? If my son is a creative, and so he's very fluid in his even at 9 years old, and he's always been like 3 years old. I watch my son. I say, this boy, you know what I'm saying? He different, but you know what I'm saying? Look, don't act like parents don't know when their children different. You know what I'm saying? You know when your children different. And so he's a creative. He's an artist. He loves to dance. He loves to sing. He's very fluid in his thinking already. At a 9-year-old, I took my daughter to get a manicure, and he's like, "Well, I can't get my nails painted." I'm trying to. He wanted it green and blue. He was like, and he was doing the moves when you're seeing Pikachu. He's like all into anime. He's like, I'm about to do these moves with the fingers that they do, and I'm about to control the water. And he's like, I got these cool nails, and it never dawned on him that that's a girl thing. To him, it was just cool.
That is authenticity.
Yes, and he's always been that way. So now the God that I believe in is the God that would not keep him from being his authentic self. Exactly. But the God that I was raised up believing in would condemn him for that.
Right.
Would keep him from that, say, that's not for you. That's not for you. And even I did not know that I wasn't as deconstructed as I thought, because when he asked me, why can't I get my nails painted? I was like, because you can't. And he was like, but why not? So I even had to question my thought. And I was like, well, let me compromise. I told him, well, pick a color. And he picked green, like a sparkly green. I was like, you can get your thumbs painted. Let me do halfway. I ain't ready. Have y'all seen that Kevin Hart was like, wait, I ain't ready.
Mama's got to work on that.
I was like, you can get a manicure, clear on there. You can get one thumb. Let me come along slowly. I'm coming. So,
yeah, work on that, Mama.
But
Joel,
it's not a Santa thing with me because God is more real now for me.
Well, I'm glad that Joel brought up Santa, because that was actually one of the huge triggering points for me was when my mom said, my son was 4 and we hired a Santa to come to the house, and she lost her shit. She started screaming, if you teach him about Santa, he will never believe in God. And that was when I was like, you know what? You have no love. This is done. So, if you make up a fairy tale, regardless if it's Santa, the Easter Bunny, or God, if you don't have the backing of faith and truth and love, then it's going to collapse. It's going to put in shame. It's going to do all of those things.
Right. Absolutely.
Carl, what were you going to say?
So I was going to say, one of the most confusing times to me in parenting was when my daughters were in junior high. To me, that's the most ridiculous time of parenting.
Right.
When girls are in junior high, I just used to look at Laura and say, what do I do? And she would tell me to do something, and I'd get the opposite reaction than I thought. So my son moved off to college, and I told my wife, I feel like I'm in my man boat paddling through the estrogen sea. And
why you make that sound so?
I don't know what to do. And I couldn't appreciate it because
it's a beautiful sea.
When they finally turned back into human beings again, they moved away. But there was an incident that my youngest daughter, she's like 5 foot nothing, very smart, intelligent. Anyway, I looked up one day, I was weeding the garden, and I look up and she's standing over me. And I mean, she just let me have it. Both barrels, and her husband, I think, would agree that we've never won an argument with her. She's got it going on, and she was just letting me have it. And there was there was that moment when I almost told her, just, be quiet and don't talk to me that way. I started to have that fear and control kind of response to her, that's what I was trained to do. But for some reason I stopped and I listened to what she was saying. And that, was she and I today are very close. She's, I don't know how, she's in her late 20s, but she and I are very close today. We like the same music. We talk about it. She's been staying with us for a little while. But I said it parallels religion and ministry. And so I posted something the other day. And I said, maybe instead of listening to so many sermons, we should have been listening to each other. And I think listening, Jason and I are good friends over the internet. He and I, it was 2021, right? Summer of 2021, we went to see them just after knowing them from the internet. But people discount podcasts. But when you do a podcast, you have to listen. I see Sherry right now. She's just listening. And, ask me if one thing changes the world beside what Jason said, love. I think the second thing might be listening, listening.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good, Carl. And, one thing that you've modeled so well for so many of us, Carl wrote a book called A Parent Faith years ago that really was the beginning of literature, I think, for parenting while deconstructed. because he got a view of a God that was different than the God of religious teaching. And he started, interacting with his kids differently because of that. He listens to his kids. He's not afraid to apologize to his kids. I love that. December taught me so much in her chapter of Parenting Deconstructed, because she had a completely different perspective. So many of us are old and jaded by the church. December's like, you know what? Give your kids agency. If they want to go to church, empower them in that, because they don't have the same baggage that so many of us grew up with. And so I think that's a great perspective. So every chapter of the book brought a different perspective like that. And it was such a gift to see all these different perspectives on loving your kids where they are.
I think that especially evangelicalism, but also Islam, has an ownership of with your children. And I saw an interview years ago with, I've been trying to remember her name. It's the Princess of Saudi Arabia. And she was on Oprah on Super Soul Sunday. And she said that she had written a book about how your children are not yours. And I think that once you realize that you are raising humans as opposed to yours, and in fact, she no longer says my children. She takes all ownership of that off. And that was such a foreign concept to me, because, Christianity is all about ownership, God, the husband, and all of these ways and means and how things are supposed to function. But when you take the ownership off of your children, their goals, their dreams, and all of that, it enables them to be.
Yeah, there's the religious word.
I think
there's
go ahead, Carl.
There's a religious word, formation. And a lot of people like that word. I don't like it. I don't want to, mold my children and white knuckle them to be exactly what I think they should be, because sometimes I don't know what they should be. And anyway, go ahead, Jason. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say that, Christianity, the Christianity of my upbringing and of my ancestors, definitely had that ownership mentality of children. You are in the business of raising Christians.
Yeah.
You want to pass on your faith. But when you start to see God differently, when you're not living under control anymore, when you realize that love doesn't control, and that God's not a tyrant in the heavens who wants to lower the boom on everybody and send everybody to an eternal torture chamber until the end of time, then you are set free from that whole mindset of, I've got to save my kids. I've got a family member right now who would absolutely reject her gay, lesbian, bisexual children, because she feels like that's what she would have to do in order to get them to make a profession of faith and be a Christian so that they can spend eternity with her. She thinks that's the loving thing to do. And how warped is that mindset that says that the most loving thing you can do is reject someone because they don't conform.
That's what my mom did to me. She said, "You're going to hell and you're taking my grandson with you."
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
And walked out of my life because she said that my sin would affect her salvation and her eternity. The only thing it did was cause me to believe that her God was the ultimate asshole.
Absolutely.
It pushed me so far away. Like, I don't want anything to do with anything that tells a mother to leave their daughter, to leave their children. That's not love.
Absolutely not. I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Therapy.
Yeah. And what I love that the thing about deconstruction is, when you have I was a pastor, so excuse me if I get a little preachy, but when you buy a car and you get finance for it and there's still lease payments on it, and you default on those lease payments, the dealership or the finance company can file for something called a claim and delivery, right? And with that claim and delivery, they're saying this person is defaulted on this agreement, and so therefore whatever this piece of property is we have a right to come and get it. Now, normally they don't come in the day. They don't come, even though they have a legal document that says they can get it, they're going to come in the middle of the night or something because they don't want the confrontation. They say, we own this, but we're not going to stand in your face and take it from you. We're going to come in the night, because possession is 9/10 of the law, or whatever the case is. And the thing about it is, when you repossess something, that means you owned it in the first place. And I promise you, I'm going to try not to make this sermon too long. And really, I think deconstruction is a kind of repossession. If y'all remember Auntie Maxine, there was a couple years back where she went viral for, she was talking to somebody who was wasting her time, and they only get much time when they're doing these questions, and he was rambling on and stuff. And she said, I'm reclaiming my time, reclaiming my time.
Yep.
Reclaiming my time. And I think of deconstruction as reclaiming my time, reclaiming my autonomy, reclaiming my faith, reclaiming having my own ideology. The problem with a lot of Christians is they don't even know that they're slaves, and they're so preachy. They think they're slaves to the gospel, or they think they're slaves to God. You're slave to religion and legalism, because if you weren't, when your children who you think that you own say that they're gay or something like that, or whatever it is, let me take a tiny little bird walk here. In my book, The Church Can Go to Hell, I talk about, and I know I just glossed over that. Y'all can find it on Amazon. The Church Go to Hell. But there's a young man, Josh Alcorn, who I talked about, was 14, and he called himself Leela. So I'm going to call her Leela. And she knew that she was a girl, but her parents never accepted that. And she killed herself at 14 years old. And she left a message to be published. She scheduled it to go live upon she scheduled the whole thing, planned it all out. And she said she understood that her parents would never accept it. And they sent her to Christian counselors who didn't help her through her depression, but made her feel even more guilty and even more less worthy and even more condemned than she was already feeling. And she finally just threw herself in front of a tractor trailer. And I think about that. And I think about that God that you serve that would drive your child in front of a tractor trailer. And that God is not that you created that God. That God is a figment of your imagination. That God is not real. No. That's the God that's Santa Claus. Because the God that I believe in would say, I love you. I made you, so I get you.
And Santa only gives presents to the good. Yeah. Santa only gives presents to the good and keeps a list and all of that.
Sees you when you're sleeping like a stalker.
Yeah. Oh God, don't even get me about God in the bedroom. That just is a whole new twist.
And so that's how the Christians treat their children like slaves, because if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to punish you, and God is going to punish you too.
Carl, talk to me.
Well, first of all, from what December said, that was what apparent faith was about, that Jason was talking about, is I, as a father, couldn't send one of my kids to hell. And,
exactly.
I don't kill them for disagreeing with me. Anyway, that's a whole nother subject.
Being a parent proved to me that their God didn't exist.
Yeah. I don't want to take up all the time, but
you go.
When, I said, my children, when we got through deconstruction, I set them down on the porch and said, okay, we've been changing some of our beliefs. And they're kind of like, well, welcome. We've been waiting on, we've been waiting for you to do this. They were there. And here's the reason, I think, because of the three things we accidentally did right. Number one is we challenged them to be brave. I used to talk to my oldest daughter, and I would say, she had to give her teeth pulled or answer the phone or something like that. And I'd say, be brave. A few years later, I heard her whisper that to her sister. And she said, be brave, Lily. And my son, he was always with me when I was preaching and things. And at times I would challenge him to be brave. But my oldest daughter that I told to be brave, I was having breakfast with her daughter, the other day, and I said, "What's your favorite movie?" And guess what it was?
Braveheart.
It was Brave. Brave.
Oh, there's a Brave movie. Sorry, I'm out of the
Yeah.
Disney circle. Okay.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
so we Laura and I about lost it at breakfast when that happened. But the second thing was we tried to help them find their voice.
Yeah.
And the thing we discovered after ministry was that I, as a pastor, really didn't have a voice. I always thought I did because I talked a lot and I stepped on people's toes, but that was only within a framework. It was within alleys. I couldn't go outside of this too much, or you get asked to leave. But finding your voice requires that you know who you are, and somehow my kids know who they are, and because they do, they have a voice. The last thing is teach them, like December's talking about, teach them to think for themselves. Because you're not going to be there. My son moved to Taiwan. He's on the other side of the planet. So he's got to think for himself. I'm not there. But since he did, he was able to lead me into deconstruction because he learned how to think for himself. So that's my 2 cents.
So good, Carl.
The agency of being able to speak for yourself is something that the church is still telling me not to do.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as a woman, it was always, be nice, be kind, smile. I can smile on cue like that. Submit. Don't be strong-willed. None of that. So I think that I'm realizing part of my deconstruction was getting my voice back, getting my ownership, getting the agency of my own body back, and saying, no, you're not going to do this to me anymore. I'm so glad you gave your daughters that, Carl. Bravo. Yes. Jason?
Earlier, Sherry, to the meme on Facebook that we've all seen where it's the umbrellas, right? It's God is the top umbrella,
exactly,
protecting the husband, and then the wife, and then the children. And what I found is actually far healthier than that model, which creates monsters, is to turn that upside down, to let your children teach you. You know what? For a long time, I thought I knew my kids better than they did. And I was constantly saying things like, that's not who you are. I was constantly saying that. Well, my kids knew who they were a long time before I knew who they were, because I wasn't listening to them. I just expected them to listen to me. And you know what else? My wife was so far ahead of me on deconstruction. And if I would have shut up and listened, I could have experienced freedom far sooner, years sooner than I actually did, because I had this twisted mindset of being the head of the home, and it just doesn't work. A little child shall lead us.
Listen to the children out of the mouths of babes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Silencing children now and saying that, all of these things are flooding back where I'm even getting tripped up because there's so many times that my son taught me so many things, and that people would say, wow, he was an old soul. But our ego totally gets in the way of ownership. We want you to be like this. You better be who I want you to be. All of those things. For me, the only thing that mattered was that he was a good person. That I used to say, I don't care what you do. Always have a fallback. Always have a plan B, but just be a good person. Without all the religion, without all of that, just be kind.
Yeah. I think be kind is so amazing, or so interesting, that kindness amongst a lot of Orthodox conservative parents, or whatever the case, is one of the traits that is lacking.
Not there.
Missing. That's like the last thing. There's stern, there's discipline, love. There's all kind of things, but kindness ain't usually one of them. And, I was thinking while Carl was speaking about how the power of a parent, that you're literally if there is going to be a God, the parent will be the first God that their children experience. Think about that. All powerful. What do they teach about God? All powerful, all knowing, omniscient, omnipresent, infallible. And when you think about most religious parents, that's how they present themselves to their children.
Yeah.
I know everything. I know what you're supposed to do. I know what you're not supposed to do. I know who you are. I know who you're not. I'm going to punish you when you do wrong. I know when you're doing wrong. God going to punish you too. I'm everywhere.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's going to find your sin is going to find you out. Whatever it is, we're the first God. When you think about the nature of God, parents are the first God that your children experience. And when you think about the power of a parent, I was thinking about Carl and how he told his daughter, be brave. And then she told her sister, be brave. And then her daughter, favorite movie is Brave. Now imagine if he taught his daughters for years that they were wicked, inherently evil, nothing good. There's nothing good in you. And
Substandard.
God died for your sin.
Yeah.
You're a filthy rag and all, whatever it is.
Right.
And how that would permeate generations.
Yeah.
Because the word, the simple phrase, be brave, his daughter has become an evangelist of it. And also a pastor to her own daughter of the brave doctrine.
Yeah.
Think about
She's
that.
an RN.
The power of a parent.
She's an RN in a major city. She's the primary breadwinner in her home. And we used to tell her we're going to be like you someday. But she took it to heart. She really did.
Yeah, my atheist best friend was my moral guidance, not the church. My atheist best friend as a teenager was the one that was saying, don't do that. That's not nice. Never even was a conception that I had even been raised in the church. I was not taught how to love. I was not taught how to be kind. I was taught how to segregate everybody away from me and just we were instructed to put a prayer seat in our closets so we could go in there and be shameful in our closets. It was torture, and it was really difficult to not push that onto my child. I'm sure I failed. I'm sure I failed because I'm still peeling away the onions, and I've been deconstructing for almost 30 years now. And I'm still getting caught into that. Wow. I didn't even know I did that. Jason, tell me about the chapters in the book.
The cool thing about that, Sherry, is that you can apologize to your kids. I do, right?
Yes, I'm one that says I'm sorry. I'm definitely one that says I'm sorry, and he and I have already had that conversation.
That's so awesome, and that opens doors, that builds bridges, that restores relationships. The power of an apology. We've got a whole section in the book. You were just asking about the chapters. We've got a whole section in the book on apologizing to your kids. It was a constant theme because once this deconstruction happens, you realize I've got a lot to apologize for.
Yeah.
And if this relationship is ever going to be founded on love and trust, then I've got to make things right. And so that's really important to me. You were talking about your atheist best friend who was kind of your moral compass. One of the chapters of the book was written by an atheist. Which I love because the reality is, it's Derek Day is his name, and he's pretty in your face online. But what Carl and I know about Derek is he's one of the most compassionate human beings that walks the planet. When I was in the hospital with COVID and a blood clot going through my heart, Derek was the one on FaceTime who would not let me ignore him, who just wanted me to know that he loved me and that I was going to be okay. When Carl had his stroke, Derek's the one calling and checking up on him every week, not the Christians, not the folks from the churches that Carl's led over the years, but the atheist friend. So we've got to quit labeling one another and just see the inherent value of every human. And if we can pass that on to our kids, then we've really accomplished something.
Well, that's why my logo and my wristbands and everything that now says love is my religion. And then peace is my intention, because they go together, right?
Oh, I love that so much.
You know,
That's
it's
wonderful.
it's no longer shame, no longer, it's just, and love is hard enough as it is. It really is really hard. But that's what makes it holy in my book. Okay, I interrupted you again. Jason, give me a rundown on all the chapters.
Oh my goodness, all the chapters. Well, I'm going to grab a copy of the book from right behind me.
Okay.
Derek Day, I mentioned his chapter. It's on deconstructing discipline. Derek was raised with a mindset of spanking your kids, and you're going to drive the devil out of them basically by spanking them. And so many of us have come to think of spanking as child abuse in recent years.
Yeah.
We are inflicting trauma on our children. Someone who loves them, someone they're trusting, is causing them physical pain. And so there's several chapters on that. Phil Drysdale does a great introduction about what is deconstruction and how it can mean different things to different people. Our friend Ben DeLong wrote a chapter. Matt DiStefano did a great chapter. Elizabeth and Christopher Aker did a fantastic chapter. Carl and his wife Laura both wrote chapters. Laura is an educator and uses the whole brain teaching method, and she's fantastic. She communicates things in her chapter that no other perspective could have touched.
Wow.
About affirming your child's feelings. And she gives the example of a kid in her class who was talking about, I'm just a dummy. I'm stupid. And, a loving response, what we try to do is say, no, you're not stupid. But a wall goes up when we just argue with them. And so she listens to the child and teaches us to say, I understand how you could feel that way. There's times when I feel stupid too, but, and then help them think of themselves differently. We would do that if we hadn't had Laura contribute a chapter to the book. Keith Giles talks about the fact that his kids deconstructed before he did in his chapter. It's fantastic. Mark Karras wrote a chapter on if you're deconstructing and parenting alone, if you're a single parent, if you are married to someone who's still in the church, who's not deconstructing. How can you process those relationships? Joshua Lawson, Jonathan Puddle, John Turney, and of course, December Rose all write amazing chapters, different perspectives, and they all bring something special and unique on raising your kids to believe in themselves and to center their lives around love rather than fear. It's good stuff.
I went to a Christian school from basically 2nd to 10th grade. And until the 5th grade, I was spanked every day at school by the principal, by my teachers, sometimes in front of the class for talking too much. Go figure. I was a straight A student, but the spanking started at school. And then once I got home, I got another spanking. And now I look at it as a huge regret, but so animalistic. We are evolving as humans, and we should be able to evolve without violence. I wasn't taught any other way. I didn't know any other way. I couldn't even conceive parenting without spanking. And now looking at it going, there's got to be a better way. Communication, elevation, times out, all of those things that can help the child grow while learning boundaries. But when that's all you're taught, it's a perpetuation of generations. Those are the generational curses that need to be broken through education, through those types of things, to just be able to handle your rage. We have a show coming up about handling your rage. And parenting is one of those times that you really have to do it. Because, to reach out in violence only teaches more violence. Huge regret of mine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I had made the point somewhere where I was writing that things like that definitely solve the problem immediately. They bring it under control. They control the child. And I used to go to we went to a nursery school in an independent fundamentalist Baptist church where the nursery workers had belts in their hand most of the time. And I remember my friend and I, we just escaped through the bathroom window. Huh?
Nursery?
Yeah.
They had belts in the nursery?
Yes. And we escaped through the bathroom window. A friend of mine, we just got tired of it and we left. And,
Wow.
you know, it's just, but it's still that fear of everything's going to get out of control if we don't control it right now. And it just, what it does is drives shame deeper inside of you. You know, if you're someone that can be whipped, you know, then what does that say about you? That, you know, you're someone less than us.
Power.
And I think it's a terrible message.
Well, it's a weak message too. I mean, my whole thing now is that violence is weakness, love is strength. I mean, it really is. It's easy, it's quick, it's reactionary, all of those things to just lash out and smack someone. You know, I used to have to bend over. They had a paddle. It was all, you know, it was just fucking ridiculous. But when you don't have any other tools, when you don't know any other way. So I really hope that as a society, we are growing beyond that, saying there's got to be a better way than beating our children.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It feels like that's happening, doesn't it?
It
I mean,
does.
I feel like we're
It does.
evolving as a race of beings to hopefully move past that. And isn't it ironic that the people that cling the most to the guns and the violence are the ones who say they're following the Prince of Peace, who taught us to turn the other cheek, who taught us to never return evil for evil? It's ironic. It's sad.
No, it's lazy. It's lazy. It's really hard to love.
I think about when a little bit ago, Dr. Paula said, love is hard, a little bit ago. And I think legalism and the church in general has chosen the easiest route possible because love is too hard.
Yeah.
Too hard to love the homosexual, if that's the word you want to use. But I don't think they like that. People in the LGBTQ community like the word. It's too hard to love somebody who, a man who dresses in women's clothing. It's too hard to love somebody, you know what I'm saying, who doesn't believe like you do. It's too hard for some Christians to love somebody who's a different race or come from a different country than them. But they claim to love Christ, though. And in a lot of ways, they've chosen the easy way out with the legalism. If you conform to these rules, if you look like me, worship like me, have sex like me, vote like me as of late, because you know Jesus is a white Republican cisgender male. Did you know that? Did you know
an AR?
He looks like Kenny Loggins.
If you look, if you don't know, now you know. Okay, so if you don't vote like me too, there's so many, and there's always this thing about separation of church and state when it's convenient. But when it ain't convenient, we want to be all up in there. We want to be all up in your bedroom. We want to be all up in your bathroom. We want to be all up in your doctor's office. We want to be all up in your business. When
Literally.
it suits us.
When I was trying to teach my kids how to work, I told them the two most important things are to show up for work and then just do the work. All that other stuff doesn't matter a lot. But just like December's saying, the same thing applies to your healing, and the same thing applies to parenting.
Yeah.
You got to do the work, and it's hard as hell.
Gotta do the work.
All of it is really anything that's important is usually hard.
Love is hard.
Do the hard. I don't know, Brene Brown and people like that. Do the hard, however you want to express it, but you got to do the work.
I don't remember the scripture, but I think even the scripture said it's easy, how easy it is to love the one that loves you or care for the one that cares for you. Where the hard work is loving the one that you don't like at all. Who doesn't
and the
look
Old
like
Testament is full of excuses. I mean, technically, there's like 600 excuses to not love. You know, if they were blind, if they were born with any type of abnormality, all of those things excluded you from the temple, excluded you from God's love. If you were born a woman, I mean, all of these things have been an exclusion for all of these years. So when Christians say that they worship Jesus who brought love into the picture, I really struggle with that hypocrisy, which is why I can no longer claim to be a Christian, although Jesus is still my main dude.
Same here.
Yeah.
I love Christ too much to be a Christian.
Yeah. I mean, it's the antithesis of that.
Good.
it just drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's too much. It's too much. I love them too much. And the thing is, what's so hard is to watch Christians, and not all of them. Let me just say that for the one that's going to jump in there and say, we don't do that. Our church don't do that. It ain't everybody. Let me just take care of you right quick.
All does not exist in our reality.
Yeah, that's right.
All does not exist anywhere.
It doesn't. So, but what's so hard is to watch Christians misrepresent Christ so badly that people disregard, or dismiss or disbelieve before they even have a chance to know Christ.
But
because they don't ran into so many damn Christians that they don't want nothing to do with Christ.
I mean, but all the stories are there. Jesus, if you had leprosy, you were an outcast. Jesus healed that. He extended the limbs. Everything that
he ate with the prostitutes and the tax collectors.
Yeah,
but they don't see that part. They're like, be ye separate, come out from among them and be ye separate. You got to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You got to be in the world, but not of the world. How did Jesus manage that? He was made with the tax collectors and the prostitutes, and then he healed the leper. He managed to, but you can't figure it out though.
No.
Okay, because you're lazy. Lazy.
Exactly.
One of my favorite passages of scripture is where Jesus violates the Billy Graham rule by meeting alone with the woman at the well and empowering humanity.
Yeah. I actually went off on a little tangent about that yesterday online, saying if Jesus loved the Samaritans, you could too. Okay, what a fabulous conversation. I could go on forever with this, but it is time to kind of wrap up. Jason, any final words or wisdom, and where can people find you?
Almost everything, all my social media, website, blog, the book, everything can be found at messyspirituality.org online. And trust your kids. We need to make the shift from being naturally suspicious of our kids to giving them the benefit of the doubt. That's what love does.
I love that. December.
Oh, my final word is, you know what? If you believe in God, love God, or whatever your source is. Love people, drink water, and mind your damn business. That's what I got to say to everybody. And you're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. Love God, love people, stay hydrated, and mind your business. And then after that, you can find me on social media at December Rose, and that's DESIMBER. Also, I'm part of a wonderful podcast called The Heretic Happy Hour, and you can check us out at heretichappyhour.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Shout out to the choir family.
Shout out to the choir family. Carl?
I want to tell a quick joke about what December just said. There was a little boy sitting on the curb. He was eating candy, and someone came up to him and said, "You shouldn't eat all that candy. It's going to rot your teeth." He said, "Sir, my grandpa lived to be 97 years old." And the guy said, "From eating candy?" And he said, "No, from minding his own business."
I promise you, it's going to save your life. It's going to save your life.
Perfect.
Well, we just always say be where you are and be who you are. Presence and authenticity matters so much in all different kinds of areas. Be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace. And that's my hope for you.
Authenticity. I said it this week.
Right.
Couldn't get anything out when I first started the show, but hey, I got that word out. Just to tie into what you said, December, my Twitter profile or my pinned tweet is, I don't care who you worship, what you wear, who you have sex with, and it goes on. I just care if you're kind and you wash your hands after you go to the bathroom.
Yeah, please do that. Please.
Things that matter.
Things that matter.
I had so much fun talking to all of you guys. Thank you so much. And one thing, go buy these books, people. We've got Caro's Out into the Desert, and then we've got the Parenting Deconstructed. So go buy them. They're on Amazon. You can also go to Choir, which is Quyor publishing, and find them there. I love you all, and thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. This has been such an honor to be a part of this.
It was great. Great conversation. So I'm going to send you backstage. I'll see you there.
Okay.
I always learn things on this show. I absolutely love it. So the guests were phenomenal. I hope you guys got a lot out of it and enjoyed it as much as I do. Next week's show is on Christian mysticism. So it's going to be another good one. And stay tuned. We've got a whole lineup this year, got some awesome shows coming up. And so thank you so much for being with us. And remember, walk in love. Mwah! See you next week.